just days after celebrating his birthday, we're going to be talking about some of our favorites, some of everybody's favorite coach moments. But who better to talk about the coach than the coach himself? Welcome, Coach Jonathan Coachman.
I tell you what,
Coach,
my schedule is so full these days that to make time for you guys is going to cost you a lot of money. So I know the checks in the mail. We'll put you guys on credit, and we'll have a good time today.
Don't worry, I have an OnlyFans just for this purpose. We're good. We're totally
Fantastic.
fine.
You can subscribe to our Patreon. That's about $10,000 a month. So that'll pay for pretty much any interview that we're going to do in the future. So
there you go.
We're all good. We're all good.
Awesome.
But I do want to thank you for joining us on the Wrestling Chatter. We're a brand new channel, so we're extremely happy to have you on. But I got to ask, how do you spend your birthday around in this pandemic time?
Well, first of all, part of the reason that I'm coming on your show is because you sent a really insightful, kind email. So anybody out there that has shows, you can learn from this man who sends an email and says exactly what you want to do and doesn't want to do just some BS wrestling conversation, which we're going to talk about wrestling. But how I spend my birthday is I have two kids that are like the air that I breathe. And everybody that follows me on social media knows how much my kids mean to me. So I live 10 minutes from the beach here in Orange County, California. So we went out, had a great time, did a little body surfing, and just had a really cool time. So I'm going to be starting to travel again here pretty soon. So the positive during this pandemic, which there's been very few, has been that I've been able to spend a lot of time with my kids. So that's been good. But I love my kids, but I want to get back to work.
It's definitely a blessing having a 4-year-old myself, man. It's the best feeling. Like, it's kind of a double-edged sword where I'm kind of happy not having to work, but man, like, I do kind of want to get back to work, but getting that home period, that home time with your kids, man, it's really a blessing and just
and I've been so busy for so many years and had never really had that constant time. But at the same time, I like feeding my kids too, and I'd like for them to eat. And so with that said, and I've been very blessed over the course of my career to have some really cool jobs and work with a lot of cool people. And so I've loved every single day of everything that I've done. So unlike a lot of people that have not been so anxious to get back to work, I really am, because I love what I do. I love what I get to do. And I love sports, and I love wrestling too. So I've been very blessed.
Well, we're going to be talking a lot about sports and wrestling today. I do want to get involved with the WWE as far as your career goes. I want to say I'm like a wealth of knowledge when it comes to pro wrestling. I want to say you started around Royal Rumble 2000. Am I incorrect?
Really close. It was funny. I actually started in August before that, but I wasn't allowed on the air until January of 2000. And my first night was with The Rock. Sorry, I feel like I have something on my nose. I was with The Rock in January 8th of 2000, which was 2 weeks prior to Royal Rumble. And I had to be done with my job in Kansas City before I was allowed to be on the air with the WWE. But my first night on the air was Chicago, January 2000. So you were very, very close.
What was that feeling like walking into that locker room for the very first time as a WWE employee?
Wow. Well, I guess I had the benefit that not a lot of people do. Since I started traveling in August, I had like 5 months to kind of really get used to everybody, know everybody before I had to worry about working there. So I would travel on Mondays and Tuesdays because back then SmackDown was taped on Tuesdays, and then I would still work in Kansas City in my day job, so to speak, as a sportscaster from Wednesday through Sunday. So, but I'll never forget that I met The Rock the first day I met Vince McMahon, and that's on Vince's birthday, which is August 24th. 1999, and I was fresh out of college, and like I said, I started in Market 60. I've been very lucky in my TV career, and I know that. But watching The Rock walk in, and I'll never forget this until the day that I die. It was literally like watching Jesus Christ walk into a building, because back then he was on a meteoric rise. He was a huge star even then, but he was becoming The Rock and what he would ultimately become. So it's for people who don't get a chance to meet people like that and get to meet people. I always say The Rock is made differently, and I think Vince is made differently too. But until you meet them in person and until you're around them in person, you can't really understand that, A, they're normal people, but also they're not built like the rest of us are. They're just they're special in a very unique way. So it was cool. And my first stint there, I loved it, but I got burnt out. And then I was lucky enough to go to ESPN. And then my last couple of years have been different, good, but different. But I'm blessed to have the WWE in my life. And whether I'm there or whether I'm not there, it will always be special to me.
Now, a little bit. Were you a wrestling fan growing up?
I was. But growing up in Kansas, we didn't even have cable until I was 10 years old. And so all the great wrestling was on the East Coast. So the only way that we could see it was either Saturday night's main event, which was on NBC once a month or once every 2 months, or you buy books. Back then, there were actually books that you could buy and read about matches that they would have at Madison Square Garden or wherever it would be. So I was a fan, but I wouldn't say a diehard fan because I was just in a part of the country that we didn't get a lot of wrestling.
Now, how did that transition become? Like, did you kind of get all in as far as when you were in the WWE, you know, obviously being a fan, but now that you're in WWE, now was that becoming into like, man, like this is my one true passion now? Not one true, but a passion now in life?
I always knew I wanted to be on national TV somehow. I just never dreamed about doing professional wrestling. And the whole way I got the job was just really weird because I had just been in Kansas City for a month. Owen Hart tragically had just died, and I was in the arena, and he fell about 20 feet from where my seat was. And because of that situation, 3 months later, the first SmackDown, which is where I just met Rock and Vince, was already booked in Kansas City. They couldn't sell any tickets. And so they brought Shawn Michaels, and normally they'd bring a young kid who works in the talent relations department. They send them out with superstars all the time. But since this was such a special event, and they were launching this big new show, they sent a high-level senior vice president with Shawn Michaels and his new wife at the time. They had just gotten married. And if anybody knows Shawn, you know who he's married to. And so as a young 22-year-old kid, when he walks in with that, holy my goodness. But yeah, so I met them, and they could tell I had a passion for wrestling, that I knew wrestling, that I knew all the characters, because this was at the time of the Monday Night Wars, and WCW was big, and WWE was big. And 3 days later, I got a phone call literally out of the blue. And it was the senior VP that I had met earlier in the week. And he said, hey, listen, we're looking for a new guy. We're looking for a new broadcaster. And would you be interested? And I flew out the week after that. We got a deal done. They bought me out of my contract. My station in Kansas City put a down payment on a new helicopter. So every time I go back to Kansas to visit my folks and I see Chopper 9 on the news, I always say, you're welcome. You're welcome, Kansas City. Because I was the down payment for that 20 years ago. So it was exciting. But when you're 22 and somebody's going to pay you to travel all over the world and pay you to go to the ends of the earth, and then when you go to these places, you feel – I always say you feel very small, because when you travel to Tokyo or England or Germany or Afghanistan, and those people there know you, they're excited to meet you, they know everything that you've done. It's very humbling, because I just did it because it was fun. And I didn't realize the kind of impact you have on certain people that are outside of the United States.
You did a lot of backstage interviewing, mostly between then and 2003. We're going to talk about your heel turn, which I loved. But obviously, a lot of those segments with The Rock, personally, I love pretty much all of them, from WrestleMania 18 to the "What up, G?" Like that to me is one of my favorites. Obviously, the Charleston, all those dances that you did. Do you have one specific favorite that just flat out stands out above the rest?
Well, the one I don't like to talk about is the cow, because I grew up in Kansas, so my mother was offended because on both sides of my family I have farmers, so we don't talk about the cow one very much. But probably either the first one, because the first one was kind of what really got my nickname over. And people think that my nickname is something I use out of vanity or out of ego. But when your name is Jonathan Coachman, it's hard to say. It's 3 syllables, and in broadcasting, you want stuff that rolls off the tongue. But also, it sounds much cooler than Jonathan Coachman. So that first night, and like I said, I'd known him for 4 or 5 months, so probably the first one. And I walked into the room, and anybody that knows The Rock now knows that Brian Gerwitz was his personal writer. He now runs all of his stuff for $7 Production. And they said, hey, we got an idea. And this, to me, is a story that encapsulates what The Rock is all about. And even though he has a huge ego, and who wouldn't if you're The Rock, but he also is trying to think, how can he get everybody else over? Because if you get everybody else over, you're going to get yourself over. And so he said, we got an idea. because this is at the time where he was telling anybody in every interview, it doesn't matter what your name is. It doesn't matter this. It doesn't matter that. And he says, you're brand new to the audience. So why don't you start by asking me a question as if we know each other? And I'll say, wait a second, who are you? And then you don't answer because we don't want the people to think that you're stupid. Because if you watch The Rock, you knew he was going to do that. So he goes, and then say, it's okay, you can tell The Rock. And I said, well, Rock, my name is Jonathan Coachman, but everybody calls me the coach. And then he proceeded to say, the coach of what? The coach of a little girl's softball team, the coach of this, the coach of that. And he said my name like 5, 6, 7 times. And then at the end of the interview, so he just flipped it. He said, so why do they call you the coach, though? And now I'm comfortable. And I go, well, it's a fight. It doesn't matter why they call you, right? So people laughed. And we always had to do his interviews, even though it was on SmackDown and it was taped. We had to do his live because of the interaction with the crowd. And so we walked out of the building that night. And it's still my favorite building in the world, probably because of that night, the Allstate Arena in Chicago. And all the fans that go to the back and they wait to see you. Everybody's yelling, coach, 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 coach. And he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to get my nickname over. And from that night on, every single show that I've ever been on, including SportsCenter, and that got me in some trouble at ESPN, I said, hey, welcome everybody. I'm the coach. This is whoever, because that's who I am. I'm the coach. And I've never been Jonathan Coachman professionally, and I want to keep it that way. And people I work with now, even the PGA Tour, they understand that. They get that. And they understand we can't be normal when you're trying to stick out and make people understand who you are and what you're about. So probably that first one. And the second one would be WrestleMania 18, that I will say to this day is the single greatest hour of pro wrestling and sports entertainment in the history of sports entertainment. And I know there's been a lot of great ones, but it's one of 2 or 3 times that I can remember. And the other one is Triple H's return at Madison Square Garden, that I actually walked out onto the floor to watch it with my own 2 eyes and to know the greatness of The Rock. And Hogan had nothing to do with this. And I don't mind Hogan. He's just not my favorite person. I mean, we get along, but we've never been friends. But to watch them work for a week and put this match together, these 2 mega powers in the sport of wrestling from 2 different generations, and then to watch the crowd turn and not do what we expected them to do, and then to have The Rock be smart enough to change it while they were standing in the ring, and people thought they were talking trash to each other. And in reality, The Rock was changing it because there's certain things you can do as a babyface that you can't do as a heel, and certain things you can do as a heel that you can't do as a babyface. So to watch that brilliance in that moment that was not too big for him, because a lot of people don't understand when you're on national worldwide television, you know the red light's on, you know there's 80,000 people there, and you know there's millions watching at home. That can be overwhelming from an anxiety perspective, nerves, and only a few people can really handle it. And for The Rock to be in the moment and to hear and to understand and to feel and to be able to change it was nothing short of remarkable. And the show should have ended right there. Many people forget that Triple H and Chris Jericho still went on after them. And I think they would even tell you that the show should have ended there. But that was the most remarkable hour that I've ever seen. And to be a part of it just moments before with The Rock and to put together the interview that we did, people say it to me all the time. I'll be walking through airports every now and then, like, hey, what up, G? So it's kind of cool for sure.
Yeah, I had a quick question for you, Coach. You talked about all the amazing things that The Rock has done and what makes him stand out. But as a broadcaster, I'm very curious. What are the things that you see and you look for in great broadcasters, whether it be commentary for wrestling or for other sports on ESPN? What are the things that maybe us as viewers don't see that you believe really sets apart the greats?
That's a good question. I think, especially for wrestling commentary, which I think is the hardest thing to commentate ever, because you're trying to do. I hate 3-man booths, and when I came back a year and a half ago, I actually hated, and I'm sure Corey Graves hated working with me too. But it's just difficult. It's hard. You never say that JR and the King was great with somebody else. When you're a caller commentator and you have a big personality like I do, or like Corey does, and he's very good, but it's about timing. It's about speaking in sound bites, depending on the content that you're doing, understanding how you're delivering it to the people at home. And when I got to Sports Center, I realized there were many, many times that a lot of the things and the skills that I learned doing wrestling, and it wasn't just at the table. We would do 6 to 8 shows in the studio a week back in Stanford. And I would always be I would never use a teleprompter. So when I got to do Sports Center and we're doing a post game and they're like, hey, coach, we need you to ask 3 questions. Well, now all that training comes in because the questions might not be in the teleprompter coming off a game that you've just seen. Or if it's a game you haven't seen, you got to have the knowledge of what was the storylines going into the game. Give me a stat sheet and I can look and see that Steph Curry scored 42 tonight with 6 of 11 from 3-point range. And now Steph Curry, I'm going to be interviewing him and I can have an intelligent interview without everything being done for me. So starting in wrestling instead of doing it the other way around, and other than me and Todd Grisham, we're the only 2 that have ever been able to go to ESPN as full-time talent and make it. And I consider 9 to 10 years at ESPN making it. But there was a lot of things that I learned in pro wrestling and that I still use to this day when I do my golf and I do whatever else that I'm doing, because you've got to be able to think on your feet. You've got to be able to deliver. You got to be able to talk in sound bites. And you also have to be able to coach your voice. And what I mean by that is I spent 10 years screaming and yelling on Monday Night Raw, and I go to Sports Center, and you got to be able to bring it down, have a conversation, talk like this. You know what I mean? So ESPN hired a really great, expensive voice coach that nobody else wanted to use. Every time he came to campus, I would use him every single day because I wanted to learn how to train my voice to be able to do the different content that I wanted to do. I never would have thought 15 years ago that I'd be doing PGA Tour events today, but that's what I'm doing. If I wouldn't have coached myself and coached my voice, I wouldn't be able to do that. And then also the other part that people don't realize is a great broadcaster needs to be able to listen. Listening is such a great quality. When you're doing an interview, especially on the fly, some of your best questions can come out of their answers. And nothing drives me more crazy than watching an event on TV and you know that the interviewer or the talent had 3 questions and they were going to ask those questions no matter what. And it may not make any sense or it may just duplicate an answer that they just got back based off of a question. So you got to be able to listen and be in the moment and understand it doesn't matter if you're in front of millions of people or you're doing a podcast with 3 guys that you just met. It doesn't matter. It should be the same energy, the same effort, and the same respect.
I gotta agree with that one. I just want to say, if I ever got a chance to meet you, I loved your theme song back in the day. It's on my running playlist. Hard hit. Okay, so you mentioned about being a good broadcaster, and I know the 2020, everything hit the fan, right? I mean, sports evolving and changing. There was sports with no fans. There was no sport at all. There was more esport on ESPN. I mean, how has that changed for broadcasting and commentating?
Wow.
There's going to be a whole generation of people that are not going to remember the classic sports era of saying, "What a shot,"
Yeah, well, I had my week of despair and being a little depressed because when I left ESPN, I had visions of what I wanted to do. It took me 2 years to build that up, and I was prepared to have the biggest year I've ever had. But I had very specific jobs, and when you have very specific jobs in a pandemic, which we've never had before, those jobs go away. I was the lead host for the XFL. We were doing great. XFL goes away. Thank God for The Rock, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be the lead host when it comes back. World Long Drive Tour, Golf Channel, it goes away. So financially, it hits hard. But what you can't do, and what I'm not, is driven by the almighty dollar. Do I need to make a living? 100% that I do. But the way that I look at things now is what do I want to enjoy doing, and how do I position that around what I want to do? And when I say I'm starting over, I understand that I'm not starting over like somebody coming out of college and trying to prove themselves. That's not it. I'm starting over at the national level. So you have to evolve and change. And I spent 3 months, and quite honestly, it's probably things that I never would have pitched before or things I would have never taken time to do. I've taken on a partner who's a young kid who's incredible with technology, and he can bring my ideas to life. And we're working with the PGA Tour. We're working with the PGA of America. And we're realizing that it doesn't have to be TV quality for it to be things that people will watch. And also convincing these organizations and also networks that you can do stuff out of your house. You can do stuff virtually, and it can look every bit as good as something you would do out of a studio in Bristol, Connecticut, or in Los Angeles, and for peanuts compared to what you would pay to produce that same show in a studio. So that's been my focus. And also understanding that more places like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, they are putting out content. PGA Tour putting out direct-to-consumer content that they don't want to have to rely on the big rights fees anymore. So for any young broadcaster at home, or hell, you don't have to be young, start thinking outside of the box and think, who is putting out content, whether it's esports like what you're talking about. There's a lot of places. A buddy of mine just became the head producer at the new gaming network that Comcast is coming out with, right? So they're going to be, I think you've seen Xavier Woods put out all these videos about wanting to be a host as they're rebranding this gaming network. Why are they doing that? Because e-gaming is absolutely huge, and it wasn't 10 years ago. So when you're a broadcaster and you want to have a 40-year career, there's very few Jim Nances and Joe Bucks in the world. You've got to change, and you've got to evolve, and you've got to understand, if you don't, then it can just pass you by, and you might be on the sidelines looking for different kinds of work. I hope I still have 25 years left. I'm only in my mid-40s now. But if I treated it like I did 20 years ago when I got out of college, then I wouldn't be able to get any work. And that's something you have to be honest with yourself about and say, am I changing? Am I doing the right work? Do I have the right mindset? And if you don't, then you gotta really take a hard look at yourself and I have conversations with myself all the time in the mirror. And you got to be honest. And being honest sometimes hurts. But being honest is the only way that you're going to get to where you need to go, and especially right now.
You'd mentioned changing where you're working and looking at yourself and analyzing, making the next step. Having had positions at companies like the WWE that people would assume is the pinnacle, same with ESPN, the pinnacle, the PGA, the pinnacle. What are some of the conversations you have of when it's time to make that change? Because it's got to be terrifying to think, I've got this thing that's great. Should I make the move? Like, especially now when everyone else is having these conversations, probably during this pandemic, what are some questions you ask yourself, or how do you make that decision? It's time to start looking to the next thing.
Great question. Well, WWE and ESPN was easy because I had been traveling 52 weeks a year for damn near 10 years. And my daughter was getting ready to be born. That was an easy one. And I was burnt out, because not only did I do talent work, then I started getting in the ring, and then I had to do house shows on the weekends. So there were several months that I'd be traveling 7 days a week. And when I was home, I was doing studio shows. So that was very easy. What wasn't easy was getting somebody in the real world to take a chance on me because of their perception of pro wrestling. So I had like a year and a half where I worked at the MSG network. And luckily, the lady who ran that ended up becoming the senior VP of talent at ESPN. So that's how I got in there. The conversations you have to have is, do I have the right connections? Am I meeting the right people? Am I putting myself in position? When I decided to leave ESPN, again, to me, like 10 years is the bar that unless you have a job like, Mike and Mike, or, your own show and you can make it, then, I was a great B- talent there. They let me do all the big shows. I did Mike and Mike 50 times. I did First Take 40 times, but they never wanted to hand me the brass ring, so to speak. And that's fine. But when you live in Connecticut, which is dreary all the damn time, after 20 years, you say, you know what? Enough's enough. And plus, I knew that golf was something in a world that had no black people in it. And your number one most famous golfer is black, the last time I checked. And I saw that as an opportunity. So to answer your question, it's seizing an opportunity where you see yourself fitting in. I understand that there could be 300 black talent out there, but they don't know golf like I do. They don't work with the PGA Tour already. And so that was something that I knew. Now, was it a little bit of a gamble? Yes, it was. But I also wake up in beautiful California every day. I travel a lot, or did. But this is a sport that I can do. But more importantly than that, I can make an impact. And I can help younger people, because part of my experience at ESPN was negative. And the reason it was negative is because I always had to fight that wrestling stigma and that wrestling mindset. And the executives, not all, but the ones that I had to deal with, always made it difficult for me. And they didn't make any bones about it. It was because they didn't feel like I deserved to be there. It didn't matter if I was good enough to do the job, even though I had my own radio show for 4 or 5 years. It was about, oh, he's the wrestling guy, and people don't respect him. People don't give a shit. They don't care. All they care about is, do I enjoy watching this guy on TV or radio? And so when I left, part of my passion now and part of what I know my calling is that I've done everything that I've done in addition to wrestling for 20 years. And so I never want some young kid, 30-year-old, 35-year-old person to walk into an office and say, you know what, I would really like to do the NBA and pro wrestling. And that executive look at him and say, you know what, never been done. Won't happen. Nobody will ever let you do it. So when I'm done in 25 years, I want it to be normal. I don't want it to be normal. I watched Charlie Arnold this morning on First Take. And although she's a female, she still does WWE and First Take. Absolutely nobody ever looks at her and says, you know what, she doesn't belong on First Take because she does wrestling. And that's what my calling is, because nothing drives me more crazy than closed-minded people that look at if you don't like wrestling, fine. But don't think that there aren't really talented people that can do wrestling and real sports at the same time. And so it's very satisfying to work with people now at the PGA Tour and the PGA of America, which historically are two of the most conservative organizations in pro sports. And to have them say, you know what, we want somebody like you because we know we want to attract a different audience, a younger audience, a hipper audience, and we want our players to be looked at like this too, and you can help us with that. And that's satisfying. And so those are the things I look at now with the projects that I want to work with.
So kind of going back to your ESPN and everything that you just said, is it still a little ironic too that you were kind of a big force in maybe bringing WWE to ESPN? I remember you being on pretty much the cover of, the WrestleMania 31 coverage when Brock Lesnar re-signed with the WWE. I feel like you were kind of there bringing it to WWE, and I don't think people kind of noticed just how much you were there when WWE was involved with ESPN back in 2015.
I'm not part of the reason. I am the reason that it happened. I got a phone call at 3 a.m. from Vince's plane saying we have to get our content on ESPN. And ultimately the reason for that is the Fox deal, the $1.5 billion deal that exists right now, is because of what we accomplished for 2 years at ESPN. And they said, Coach, I've always had a great relationship with Vince McMahon and Kevin Dunn. And they said, do whatever you have to do, but we've got to get on ESPN somehow. Because even then, 2014, ESPN didn't want any part of them. Nothing. Mm-hmm. And so I went in and I fought and I fought and I fought. And I said, let's put it on a night that there's nothing else. And so we put it on ESPN News, which was still Sports Center. We did 10, 12-minute segments. We chopped it up on social media. It was by far the highest viewed stuff of the week, and it wasn't close. And they turned that content, packaged it up, and turned it into what the Fox deal is today. I had 4 amazing guys help me there. We called them Coach's Crew. And one of those guys is now the head of digital content at the WWE. And he had been a SportsCenter producer for 14 years. So I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the work we did there. Our rule was no storylines on SportsCenter. That was the rule. And so people don't even realize to this day that we started 2 storylines on the show, and they didn't realize that we were doing it. The Brock Lesnar Goldberg storyline we started on SportsCenter, and Shane coming back to fight The Undertaker we started on SportsCenter as well. So it was cool. And by that point, I said, I'm going to embrace the fight, because if they don't think I should be here after 7 years, then let's do what we should be doing. But the day that I knew that I needed to leave, and you talk about irony, was the year that Conor McGregor fought Nate Diaz the second time, and the next day was going to be SummerSlam in Brooklyn. So I went to my boss at SportsCenter. I said, hey, man, I've got a great idea. I said, give me a crew. Let's get a private jet from Wheels Up, and let's go to Vegas, cover that fight, fly overnight, cover SummerSlam, and then on our Sunday night SportsCenter, biggest fight weekend of the year. He looked at me without missing a beat, and he goes, who would watch that? And by the way, we can't do it anyway because I've already sent 3 crews to preseason football. And it was preseason week number 3. And anybody that knows anything about the NFL knows that starters don't even play in week 3 of the NFL. So I looked at him. I said, are you that out of touch that you think 3 preseason NFL games would outrate or even have the same amount of interest as what I'm pitching to you? And he goes, well, I mean, you could argue that it wouldn't. I said, there's no argument. It just wouldn't. And he goes, plus, we don't have any deals with private jet companies. And I said, so wait a second. So when Kirk Herbstreit goes from College Game Day in Auburn, Alabama, and his game that night is in Madison, Wisconsin, is he driving? Or is he flying on a private jet from Wheels Up? And when you bring in a guest picker on College Game Day, how are they getting there? Wheels Up jet. I said, so don't give me reasons when those reasons don't hold water. And that was the day that I knew I had to leave ESPN. And the irony of it is, guess where the home is now of the UFC? ESPN. That's right.
I do want to go pivot back to your wrestling career a little bit because I feel like that heel turn in 2003. First off, SummerSlam, never saw it coming. You still have one of the best lines I've ever heard in wrestling. I don't know if it was a Coach original or you got it from. Either way, I stole it. I use it everywhere. It's mind over matter. I don't mind. You don't matter. But what did that do for your career just as an overall? Was that something that you were pushing to turn heel? Because it definitely re-sparked your career to the point where, and I mean this as a compliment, that character was very, very easy to hate.
Yeah. It was not something that I was trying for. I'll never forget, we were at the gym at Titan Towers and Vince was in there working out and he comes up and he goes, hey, we had this idea, and Vince hated the fact that I'm 6'3", walk around between 230, 260 pounds, depending on the year. And he hated the fact that I was bigger than a lot of the wrestlers. And Vince always wants really small people to interview the wrestlers to make them look big. So we always had to fight that fight. And he's like, we're thinking about making you a character because you can speak, you can talk, you can cut promos, and we think you can take the physical pounding that it takes. And I tell people to this day, I played every sport. I played college basketball. I was great in baseball, a little football. There's nothing harder than training to be a pro wrestler. And I don't care what you're talking about. It's hard as hell and it hurts. But I knew after being there for approximately 4 years, I said, you know what, let's try it. And literally, as you said, it was one of the most exciting nights of my career. And doing the show Sunday Night Heat right before it, I knew what was coming. And I knew that I was going to have to attack the boss's son with 4 chair shots in just a couple of hours. It could either go really, really great, or I could be looking for another career. And so we were in Phoenix, Arizona. It was 110 degrees, and I was nervous as hell. But we had planned, and this is to me where sometimes the business misses today, is when having a long-term plan. And we planned it out for 5 or 6 weeks. And so we put me wherever Bischoff was for 5 or 6 weeks. So when I came down to ringside, when he was fighting Shane, nobody even blinked an eye because we had been planting the seed for 5 or 6 weeks that I was going to interview him as soon as he got done beating Shane McMahon. And so when he threw Shane out and I was sitting on a steel chair and I attacked Shane, to hear the crowd and to hear the, oh, shit, oh, my God, was awesome. Now, I almost died that night, too, because when Stone Cold Steve Austin ran in and they started attacking me, Shane doesn't have a 50% button. Shane goes either 0 or 100, and he's not a trained worker. I still think he's one of the top 5 most talented WWE superstars ever. If he wasn't Vince's son, he would have that moniker. But he kicked me in the kidneys or in the back so hard that I physically could not breathe for 15 to 20 seconds. And if you ever had that time where like you just can't get breath, it's terrifying, it hurts, and you don't know if your breath's going to come back. And luckily it did. Obviously, I'm sitting here today, but it hurt and it was scary. But we got past it, went back to the hotel that night. We always stayed at the same hotels, and all the fans were waiting outside or inside. They were all like, Coach, we never saw that coming. That was amazing. And that, to me, is what the wrestling business is all about. And it's why I hate social media. It's why I hate fans that want to read spoilers. Because why do you watch wrestling if you don't want to enjoy it? Why do you watch wrestling if all you're going to do is complain about it? Why do you watch and enjoy wrestling if you want to find out before it happens what's going to happen? Because those are the moments. Those are the moments that you live for as a wrestling fan, and that you live for when you're inside of the business like I have been. So it's still one of the best nights of my career.
We're going to wrap up in a few minutes, but before we go, I know you're involved heavily with the PGA. Is golf another one of your passions? I know you're a basketball player. Growing up, you look like a football player. So how did golf kind of get involved in the mix?
When I was in college and people were giving me advice on what to do with my career, and I knew I was going to be in TV, they said, hey, you got to take up golf because you're going to be playing on a lot of charity events, and it's going to be a good way to network and a very relaxed place to get deals done. And so I actually went out for the golf team my senior year of college, and I went to a small school. And the fall of my senior year, they needed a fifth player, so I agreed to go. And we played in a big event at Kansas University. And I've never been more nervous in my life. And I hit my 2 first balls out of bounds, and I shot a 114. It was by far the highest score in the tournament. But I've always had a passion for it. I love it. And I love the challenge of the game. And some of my best friends are in the sport of golf. And also, I'm a realist, too. And I understand it's why I want to be a talent coach as I move forward, too, because you got to be honest with yourself. And even though I still look very young and I've kept my youth, and I could probably be on regular TV until I'm 65 or 70, golf is a sport that age does not matter, whether when you're playing or when you're on TV, or the longer you're in golf, the more respected that you are. I'm trying to change the game a little bit and make people entertained when they watch golf, but also have the respect for golf, bring gambling into golf, which has never happened before, and it's a big part of golf as it is now. Convincing the PGA of America that needs to happen has been fun. PGA Tour just signed a huge deal with DraftKings, so that's going to be fun. So being a part of the new world of golf, and they've got really smart people who run these organizations, and they understand that if they want that 18 to 34 demographic, that is so important. And that's the age when we're all wasting money. I mean, all spending money. That you've got to have people that look like people that, look like them, are diverse, that are cool and a little bit edgy. And you can't be that old style kind of golf commentator. And I don't say that to criticize any of them, but we need to change. And we need to change from the top. And I want to be a part of that change. And I don't make any bones about it. I don't hide behind it. I want to be on CBS or NBC. I'm already with the tour. I'm already with PGA of America. And we want to see how much we can grow, because we want people like you to enjoy the hell out of these broadcasts, laugh, and say, you know what? I bet on that too. Damn it, he missed that putt. And it makes everything so much more fun. And that's what we're trying to do.
I want to thank you for everything. At some point, I do want to bring you back because I want to have like a nice, long conversation about the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sure you're still on a high from the Super Bowl. Patty Mahomes.
We got a few more minutes. If we got to go, we got to go. But I can do a few more.
Well, let's talk about your Kansas City Chiefs then.
All
I
right,
mean,
cool.
After being such a fan, I'm sure you're a diehard, lifelong fan being from Kansas. And I'm not a Chiefs fan, but I do respect them. And I do want to talk a little bit about Madden as well, because I'm a Madden player. We all love to play Madden. What is it like kind of finally seeing your Chiefs win a Super Bowl, as well as being a part of such a historic franchise like Madden? Yeah,
the Madden thing just kind of got very lucky. They were looking for a hype voice, and being a part of their franchise is awesome. I wouldn't even say it's a bucket list thing, because I never grew up saying, hey, I hope I'm in one of the biggest games of all time. It's cool to be in Madden, and I'm not going to pretend like it's not. It is. It's awesome. It's awesome when my 10-year-old son could put in the game with his friends and hear his dad at the very beginning of the game saying what every game is going to be. So, and just growing my role in the game has been awesome. As far as the Super Bowl, to say I'm a diehard fan would be an understatement. I was there. I took my son. It was the greatest day of my son and ours relationship. My kids love the Chiefs too. My daughter is already banking on the next one, hopefully this year. But going to Miami and flying from California to Miami, to have that experience with my son was amazing. To watch, I had the privilege of working with Len Dawson in Kansas City during the very short time I was there. And we became very, very close. And he was the only other quarterback in Chiefs history to win a Super Bowl. I never thought I would see it in my lifetime. Now I think we have the pieces to be what the Patriots have been for the last 15 to 20 years, because we just locked up all of our great players. But when you're a sports fan, and sports means as much to me as it does, to have your favorite team be good and have one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and you never knew that was going to happen, it means the world to me. And I love it. And the fact that I can share with my kids is even better. And I'm going to go to as many games as I can get to. Now, one of my best friends in the entire world is the wide receivers coach for the San Diego Chargers. So that makes it a little bit difficult sometimes. And they practice 20 minutes from here. So I could take my kids out to a practice, or could, anytime that I wanted to. And to see the kids, see these NFL players, and see the size and the speed and the power, I respect it so much. And then the players respect me too, because they know what I've done physically. And there's a different kind of respect when somebody knows what you put your body through physically. And the football players understand how difficult it is to be in the wrestling ring as well. So it's been awesome. But it's been awesome because I got to share it all and to have Chiefs fans. But I got to watch the game. I got my tickets, it's funny enough, from the San Francisco 49ers, because we had Wrestlemania at their stadium 2 years ago. So our head of marketing became friends with them. And so I got my tickets for face value through the team for $1,500. So I got two for $3,000. Now, people may say, well, that's a lot of money. It's not for the Super Bowl at a place that only holds 65,000. And to have some idiot in front of you wearing these chains saying $9,200 for this ticket is worth every dime, when they were up 20-10, made it that much sweeter when we came back and won. And I went, not $9,200 for this ticket. But everybody was very kind, because I was wearing all my Chiefs gear, and my son was in his Chiefs gear, and I was surrounded by 49ers fans. But it was beautiful because we were all cheering for our team. We were high-fiving each other. We understood that both franchises hadn't been in such a long time. It'll be a day that I'll never forget.
Growing up in Los Angeles, I became a Patriots fan, and every year I'm like, this is the year that someone else is going to come up and defeat the Patriots. Do you share that kind of feeling when it comes to, let's say, the Baltimore Ravens? Because I feel like Lamar Jackson is just getting better and better every single year.
I would if we didn't have the best quarterback. When you've got the best quarterback, and you've got the best front office, people that are just fans, and sometimes it's very rare that I wish I didn't know as much as I know. And I wish I hadn't, but again, that's very, very rare. Knowing how important a good front office is, and knowing how complex the numbers can be, and being able to keep all your players, but also understanding there's going to come a time when Tyreek Hill is going to walk out the door. There's going to come a time. So you have to keep drafting young players, because for the first 4 years, they're very, very inexpensive. And we've been able to draft incredible players. All of our talent came from the draft. So we didn't have to sign any big-time, big-dollar guys coming in from – and so that's why our team's so good. And that's why we've been able to keep everybody. And that's not going to last. So you have to keep looking at guys in college. And as long as we can keep young guys for Patrick Mahomes to throw to, we can be good for, the next 10 years, which is what he signed for.
Yeah, I have a question about Patrick Mahomes. Now, were you a believer in him as soon as they got him, or did it take some time before you came to believe that he was the best there is? And if it took some time, what was the moment that you became a believer in him?
Well, I liked Alex Smith, but Alex Smith is very, very conservative. The way he plays is conservative. And when you've got a head coach who I adore, but is not a good clock manager, the year we were down 9 to the Patriots with 10 minutes to go, and we had an 8-minute drive, that to me is not understanding clock management. You got to have 2 possessions, and you got an 8-minute drive with 10 minutes to go. I knew we needed somebody else. One of my good friends was the head equipment manager for the Chiefs. So I would get these little nuggets that he would send to me, because he was in the locker room every single day. And back then, I hated the fact that he left, because I would get the same box that the players would get. I would have all this sweet swag, all this stuff that nobody else would get except the players, and I would get it. So I don't get that stuff anymore. But it was a great couple of years. But he would tell me when they got drafted, he's like, this kid Patrick Mahomes. And because he came out of Texas Tech, and it was an offense that you got 5 receivers who couldn't throw in the Big 12. I could throw in the Big 12. But he's like, this kid in practice is dynamic. He is fantastic. And he got to play the last game of the season the year before he became the starter, and he was awesome. He was fantastic. He was just throwing darts, and that was the game that I knew Alex Smith was going to be gone, and the reins were going to be handed over to Patrick Mahomes. And being a Kansas City guy and growing up in Kansas, seeing him invested in the city, seeing the fact that he doesn't live somewhere else like a lot of players do in the offseason, and now that he's bought part of the Royals, it's awesome, because And I also say this: when people love you, there is nothing, right, guys? Whether it's your family, your friends, when you get that kind of love and people show how much they appreciate you, that's something the money can't buy. There is no better city in America to be a great sports player than Kansas City. And any player will tell you that. Because everywhere you go, they fawn all over you, but yet they let you eat dinner. They go crazy for you, but they let you shop. They, all these things, you get everything because they're good, wholesome, great people who just love what you do. They want to show you their appreciation and then leave you alone. And that's why he lives there. That's why he's building a business there. And that's why we all love him so much.
So pretty much in summary, Coach's prediction, Kansas City Chiefs, another Super Bowl victory.
At some point, I'm not dumb enough to say we're going to win it every year because it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's a reason we only had one before this year. So I'm not one of those idiots who go, we're going to win the next 10. It's difficult. It's difficult. But do I think we'll win 2 or 3? Yes, I do.
I as much as I hate to agree, then there's really no denying that. I mean, Chiefs are just on a tear. But I know you got some stuff going on these days. I know you got a podcast with JBL. Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we wrap?
Yeah, we did have a name. We don't know what it's going to be called now because we're having some licensing issues. But we started this because we understand how big sports betting is becoming, and we like to be ahead of the curve a little bit. And now that gambling and sports betting is becoming legal in a lot of states, we started a sports podcast. Me and JBL are the hosts. But we also, the guys we have as the experts are real professional gamblers. And that's what makes our show stand out from shows on ESPN or Fox or whatever, because our guys actually bet the games that they give out. So every single week I give out PGA Tour picks. We give baseball, basketball, whatever it is. The guy's named the Philly Godfather. They are legendary. They call them as animals. And they have their own website. You can buy their picks. But the reason there's great value there is that anybody that's a gambler knows that there's a lot of people in Vegas that sell their picks for $25-$50 a pop. They don't. It's like $150 a month, and everything that they bet on, they put on there. So you're not, you could buy 10 picks for $500 and go 5-5, and now you're out $500. So these guys, none of them, there's 9 of them, none of them have had a losing month in over 2 years. So if you practice money management and you make the same bet on every single thing, you're going to come out ahead if you follow us and you watch our podcast. Now, we don't give all their premium picks on our podcast because that would be anti-productive. But we give a lot of picks out, and we give a lot of advice. We give finance advice. JBL is really smart in the finance world. So we're having a good time, and I really believe that it will turn into a daily show for somebody within the next 6 months.
That's amazing. I got one last question just because I've been dying to know for the last 18 years. That segment with you and Booker T where you did the Coach Rooney and Eric Bischoff comes out for the first time. Did you know Eric was going to be there, or did they just say act accordingly?
I can honestly say that there's probably been less than 5 times, maybe less than 3 times that I haven't known fully what was going to happen. There have been, when leaks started happening and the internet started getting big, they really kind of started closing ranks. Luckily, I've been somebody that they could trust for 20 years. So they never kept me in the dark, but they'd keep a lot of other people in the dark. So I knew everything that was going to happen that particular time. Now, when they told me that they were going to bring him in, it was shock because there had been such an animosity between the two companies. And once I met Eric, and Eric to this day is one of my favorite people. He's such a hell of a nice guy. And people don't understand that when you run a wrestling company at that level, your ego has to be, even if it's fake for the TVs, has to be over the top because you have to show that you're in control of all these huge personalities all the time. And he was going up against a man who has the biggest personality in Vince McMahon at the time. So he really surprised me at how cool he was, how good we've been for the last 18 years, whatever it's been. And he continues to be a really good guy. And it's funny when I run into wrestling fans that don't quite understand that, and they still call him names or they call me names or whatever, and they don't understand this is just what we do. It's not necessarily who we are. And there's probably not a nicer person, I think, in the sport of wrestling than myself. But if you look at me on TV for 3 or 4 years, you would never guess that because it's fun. And in life, I like to have fun, and it was fun to do, and it's fun to try to make people hate you. and then when they meet you at a bar and you have a drink with them, they realize, oh, this isn't the guy that I hate on TV. Because we try to be good actors, just like the people in Hollywood, just with a physical taste to it, I guess. So if you really think about somebody, they're probably not the person that you think they are. But there's also some people that are big jerks that you wouldn't think they'd be jerks either. So it goes both ways.
Once again, I want to thank you for everything. Everybody on watching, you can follow Twitter, TW Chatter. You can follow the coach on Twitter. Like, comment, subscribe on these videos. Once again, I cannot emphasize just how grateful I am for your time. Yes, but I want to thank you for everything, Coach.
Yeah, I wish you guys nothing but the best. It's a daunting task to start a new show on any platform. So thanks for having me on. Thanks for asking me. I'll be following you guys, and don't let it last like a month or two. Put in the time. It takes 2 or 3 years to really build a show. So don't get frustrated, and just have fun with it and see where it goes.
I was say thanks for the coach. Thanks for the coaching.
You got it. You guys be good.
Thank you as well.
Hey, it's Christy Olson. If you like this video as much as I did, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends so they can join in the wrestling chatter too. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow the show on Twitter at TW Chatter. See you next time.